So we've looked at our content revision. What we're going to look at now is the different question styles and how to make sure you are gaining every mark possible. So in politics and participation, rights and responsibilities and life in modern Britain, you have exactly the same style questions. Most questions are short answer 1 and 2 mark questions, and for your 1 mark questions, it'll be these kind of command words. You've got to identify something, select something if it's multi-choice, or name something, and there's some examples right there. For your 2 mark questions, it might be to name 2 things, it might be to explain something. So an explanation is more than identification. You need to say why it is something or what it stands for. You need to look at giving 1 or 2 sentence answers. You also might have this style question where it says, using 1 example, explain what something is. So for example, using 1 example to explain what identity is. To get the full 2 out of 2, make sure you do both points. You give an example and you explain it. And they're your 1 and 2 mark questions. Really easy if you do your revision, not so easy if you don't. Okay, so your 4 mark questions, you have 3 of these in P&P, R&R and LIM in each one, and these are your source questions. So they'll have a source of information, and then it usually asks you to explain 2 points about the source. Sometimes it'll be comparing it to what's in the UK, so it might tell you about the media in China, and you've got to pick 2 points out of the source and compare that to the UK. For your 4 mark questions, you need to explain your points. You cannot just pick things out of the source. You've got to actually relate it back to the question and explain what you're talking about. You've got to use your own knowledge to justify what you're talking about. If it's compared to the UK, make sure you do that, and also use your keywords. So, for example, this 4 mark question here says, following the Leveson report of 2012 into phone tapping by newspapers, concerns were raised over the freedom of the media to intrude into people's personal lives. During the 2016 presidential election, similar concerns were raised about social media. According to Stanford University, 60% of American adults got their news about the election from social media. Social media was used to share 40 million fake news stories during the election. This situation has led some people to question whether democracy is undermined by too much media freedom. Your question then says, referring to source A, discuss 2 reasons why restricting the freedom of the media could strengthen democracy. What I would do is I'd get my highlighter and I'd highlight the bits of the source that you're going to use in your points. So your first point is about the phone tapping, your second point is about fake news. So let's have a look at this answer then. This answer gets 4 out of 4. They've discussed 2 clear points, and they are completely different points, the 2 points I've mentioned. They're not repeated, they use keywords and they explain, they don't just copy bits out of the source. So in reason 1, they've said, restricting the freedom of the media can strengthen democracy as media won't intrude into people's personal lives. By not restricting the media, this breaks the right to privacy. So they've picked the bit out of the source about the phone tapping, but then they've explained it into how that increases democracy. So the bit about by not restricting the media, they're actually using their own knowledge of democracy and using that point to justify it. In reason 2, they've spoken about the fake news stories, they've got the point from the source about the US elections, and then they've explained it. They've said this can cause confusion in the audience and breaks one of the responsibilities of media, which is the fake news, that news must be accurate. So again, they've got the point out of the source and they've explained it in the context of the question. Therefore, that is 4 out of 4. If you look at this example for the same question, they've only got 2 out of 4 because yes, they've picked something from the source and yes, they have explained their point, but they've done the same point twice. They've spoken about the fake news stuff twice, even though they've explained it slightly differently. Both of their reasons are exactly the same point. So please make sure in your 4 mark questions it is 2 completely separate points. Then we move on to our 8-mark questions. Your 8-mark questions are your essay questions. You have 2 of these for P&P, LIM and rights and responsibilities. You need different points of view. If you only have the one point of view, you can only really get half marks. You have got to use your key terms, your citizenship words, things like democracy, responsibilities, equality and so on. You really need case studies and evidence to back up what you're saying. Don't just waffle on. Make sure you've got actual points to discuss. You've also got to make sure you relate it all back to the question, and a justified conclusion will help with that. So let's have a look at this example. It says using a more proportional electoral system at UK general elections will strengthen democracy. To what extent do you agree with this statement? In your answer, you should consider democracy as a key value underpinning British society, the arguments for and against the system currently used, and advantages and disadvantages of more proportional systems. Again, I'd get my highlighter and I'd highlight the key bits. So, proportional electoral system, strengthen democracy. What is this question actually asking me? And I'd sit there for a minute or so and think what the question is asking me. So I can work out that this question is saying, should we use proportional representation rather than what we usually use, which is first past the post? How is it democratic? What's good and bad about first past the post? What's good and bad about proportional representation? So if we have a look, this answer will show you how, yes, you can use lots of big words, but actually you might be wasting your time. This person has said, I somewhat disagree with the statement that using a more proportional electoral system at the UK general elections will strengthen democracy. I disagree with this because at the minute the voting system used in UK general elections is first past the post, and that is sorted by the party who wins the most number of seats. A seat is won by winning the most votes in the constituency. This is the fairest way of making sure most popular candidate got in. A disadvantage of only one person having this control means that not everyone in the constituency is being represented, so with a proportional voting system would help this. They've only got 2 out of 8. They've wasted a load of time at the start by repeating the question. As you can see, it's in quotation marks. Total waste of time, don't ever do it. They've only actually discussed one point, the fact about getting the most votes in a constituency wins a seat. They've only discussed one point, therefore they're only ever going to get 2 marks. In fact, nothing they say is worthy of any credit until this is the fairest way of making sure. So basically, you need to have lots more points, you need to make sure you've got your evidence in there and use a conclusion. A better example then. This one says the rights of UK citizens are better protected than the rights of citizens in non-democratic countries. Evaluate this view. Evaluate will always mean look at the good and the bad. So the good and the bad points about that. So for 8 marks, let's have a look. We have said some people may agree with this view as if the UK is a democracy. This means people have the power to change the government by voting for the party they wish to control the country. Therefore, they can vote out of government if they feel the rights of the people are not being protected properly. You can't do this in a non-democratic country such as North Korea. In the UK, we have the Human Rights Act. This puts all of our human rights into UK law so that if any of our rights are breached, it is therefore a legal matter and people can be sent to trial in a criminal court. This ensures our rights are protected. Furthermore, our courts are led by the judiciary, who are politically neutral. They're able to judge the situation from an unbiased position, again supporting the protection of our human rights. In non-democratic countries, this is not the case, and non-democratic countries have a politically biased judiciary who are linked to the government, and therefore their rights are not protected. However, some people would argue that our human rights are not always protected. For example, Stephen Lawrence was a black teenager who was killed in a racist attack. The police did not investigate it fully, so the offenders were not sanctioned properly. His human rights were not protected properly. Furthermore, some rights have been restricted. For example, since terrorist attacks have occurred and knife crime has increased, certain groups may have been targeted by the police and government policies. Overall, even though there are some restrictions on human rights in democratic countries, they are protected at a much higher level than in places where democracy does not exist, as the government is held accountable for their actions and can be voted out. That question is going to get 8 out of 8. It's got different points of view highlighted in the different colours. It's got actual key evidence that are highlighted in the yellow. So it's got real facts in there and it's got a justified conclusion. So 8 out of 8. Then we move on to the 12-mark question, which will be part of your active citizenship module. So this one's usually always an analysis and evaluation of your action. This question says, think about the overall impact of your action. Analyse ways your citizenship action made a difference. Your answer should refer to the overall goal or aims of your action, how successful your action was, and the outcome achieved. So let's have a look. It says, for my action, we helped the local homeless people in our town of Wolverhampton. Our aims were to raise £50 to give to the homeless charity, to feed 50% of Wolverhampton's homeless, and to raise awareness to pupils in our school. I've then gone on to say that we were successful in our first aim because we sold cakes at lunchtime in our school. We managed to raise £76, which was given to the charity. A worker from the charity, Mrs Jones, explained they would use the money to add to the rent that they have to pay for the hall where they provide the food and shelter for the homeless. The rent is £100 per week, so we gave them 3/4 of a week's rent. In our second aim, we were not successful. There are 100 homeless people in Wolverhampton. We were not allowed to volunteer at the homeless charity as you had to be 16 or over and we were only 15. Due to this, we were accompanied by our parents and we walked around Wolverhampton city centre and handed out food parcels to the 15 homeless people we found, so we did not meet our target. However, we did do what we could to ensure that at least 15% of the homeless population were fed. In our last aim, I feel we were successful. We gave out leaflets to 250 pupils in our school. We informed them of the numbers of homeless people, what a typical day is like. We used information the charity gave us and ways they can help. We could have done a before and after survey to gain their levels of understanding, but at least they were given the information. Overall, our outcome was good. We displayed citizenship skills of group work, advocacy, researching and planning, and working with others. We made a positive contribution to our local community by informing our pupils in school about the issue and raising money, so all students in school were aware. We made a positive contribution to our area by helping the local homeless, showing our school to be active citizens and feeding people in need. We need to do more for the wider community. If we could share our work with other schools and had more time, we could have done bigger events such as fundraising, fairs, and tried to make a difference on a wider scale. That answer got 12 out of 12. It addressed all of the points, and again, when it's bullet pointed, go through and tick them off as you go through. They've used evidence, so they've got loads of statistics in there, not just the proportion that they've achieved, but actual how many people they've sent leaflets out to, how many people they've spoken to, and so on. They've evaluated their success. They've said what went well and they've said what could have been better. And you always need to remember that on a local level, as in your school, community level, whether that be social media or your local area, and a wider level across the whole country. They've also discussed their citizenship skills, remember advocacy, researching and planning, and their success at different levels. They're key things that you need in any 12-mark question.